Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, hosted by the South African Cities Network in conjunction with the City of Ekurhuleni to celebrate World Town Planning Month. The session is a two-part engagement containing a workshop and a discussion on the theme Youth Voices in Spatial Transformation. Thank you for taking the time to join us. I'm Shannon Derejo from Creamer Media's Contract Publishing. Please note that the Q&A function has been enabled, so please post your questions into the Q&A box, which you'll find on the panel at the bottom of your screen. You can also interact with the panelists and other attendees in the chat box. The webinar is being recorded and will be sent to you afterwards. We are also streaming it live to the Engineering News YouTube channel. I'm going to hand over now to Kyra Hannah-Brown, Built Environment Project Manager at the South African Cities Network. Over to you, Kyra.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Here we are. So welcome to this Ekurhuleni World Planning Celebration webinar. It's a session that's a partnership between the City of Ekurhuleni and the South African Cities Network with the theme of Youth Voices in Spatial Transformation. My name is Kyra Brown, and I'm a project manager in the Built Environment Program at SACN. I'm responsible for convening a task team called the BAIT. And the BAIT is a group of municipal practitioners from across the country and include colleagues from Ekurhuleni City Planning Department who are helping to put this webinar together and who are part of our panelists today. This will be a 2.5-hour session with two parts. The first half is going to be quite unconventional, very creative and interactive, hosted by my colleague Siwe Ntombela, who will be sharing her project called the Visualization Studios. We'll then have a short 15-minute break. And the second half will be an informal discussion where we will share some reflections from the first half. And we'll also be talking about the role of young planners in transforming spaces. And this session will be moderated by Siphelele Ngobese, who's also at SACN as a researcher in inclusion and well-being. So what we really want to do today is share an alternative engagement methodology with city practitioners. We want to amplify the voices of young people inside and outside of the city. We want to facilitate and support intergenerational conversation to share experiences between young and more experienced planners. And we want to enhance the connections and synergies between the work that we're doing in terms of spatial transformation and youth. So I'm just going to go over a few agreements just so that everything runs smoothly. So we will be using Zoom and screen sharing a mural board, which is what you can see now on your screen, where we'll be capturing inputs. We also request your permission to record the session and to stream onto YouTube. Please keep your microphone off. We're not speaking, but there will be many, many opportunities to unmute yourself and offer your inputs in, especially in the first half of the session. There will also be times when it's best to have your camera on. So please make sure you are somewhere where you can just switch it on if we need to share some kind of visual content in the first session. And then can you also please use the chat to post any comments or questions? We can kind of keep a flow of a discussion going on the chat. And there will also be chances to speak into the session. So just raise your virtual hand when you do want to contribute, or we'll invite you in to unmute yourself. And lastly, this is a safe and non-hierarchical space. So we really want to encourage honest and authentic discussion. So in this room, forget about, you know, if your boss is here or if your superior is here. We all just want to kind of converse as equals here today. And in order for us to have this interactive and non-hierarchical session, what I'm going to do is upgrade everyone to panelists so that we can all participate properly instead of having a passive audience. So I'm going to ask Shannon, who's our Zoom host, to start upgrading everyone now as I introduce you to our speakers who will form part of the discussion in the second half, so that you as the audience can have a chance to interact with these speakers. So thanks, Shannon. You can start upgrading people now. So just by way of a quick introduction to who will be speaking today, I mentioned Siwe Ntombele, who will be a host of the first part, and she is an urban planner and a researcher at SACN. Marcus Neustetter is the co-founder of Trinity Sessions and also co-facilitator of the Visualization Studio. Siphelele Ngobese is a researcher in inclusion and well-being at SACN. Moniake Moteane is an urban specialist at the World Bank and also a winner of the SACN's Young Planners competition. Zubeida Lowtown is also a winner of this competition, and she is currently doing her PhD at the University of Glasgow and is a young professional town planner. We're also joined by Rudadzi Mabaso, who is a senior manager in the city planning department at the city of Ekurhuleni and a member of the Bay task team. And then Palesa Tita is the head of the department of city planning and a member of the BAIT. Finally, we are joined by Tlulohelo Mogere, who is a research intern at the Inclusive Cities program at SACN and does a lot of work in youth development at the Cities Network. So Shannon, by now, I hope we are all equals in the space.
Yes, that's correct.
Fantastic. Okay, welcome everyone to being promoted as panelists. Thanks, Shannon. So very quickly, before we get into the visualization studio, we would love to get a sense of who is in the room. So unfortunately, we don't have enough time to do a round of introductions. But what I'm going to ask is that you all put your area of work or your area of interest, kind of what brought you here today, into the chat. So if you're a planning practitioner, put that in. If you're an academic researcher, if you're multidisciplinary, if you're a human who's just interested in this work, then put that in the chat. But let's have a chance to see who is among us in the room before we move over. So let me just open the chat. Okay. Cities Network, hi Sean and Palesa, welcome everyone. Anyone else in the room? Even if you're a panelist, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to hand over to the brilliant visualization studio team, which will be hosted by Siwe. So thank you all for joining and really looking forward to the session with you.
Oh, I'm spotlighted. Wow. Okay. Good morning, everyone. We're very excited to be here. As Kyla has already said, my name is Siwe Ntombele. I'm working in the Built Environment Integration Program at the South African Cities Network. And we have very ambitiously, I might say, this year, commissioned a virtual visualization studios process, which was basically a project that was conceptualized out of this need to kind of see or figure out and think through collectively what the future of our cities would look like, and mostly focusing on the lived experiences of people within our cities. So we virtually went to 9 cities across the country from, I think it was April until September, and held a series of engagements with a variety of people from different spaces within the city interested in development and the future of a city. So a range of city practitioners, students, entrepreneurs, creatives were all in these sessions. And we were basically trying to figure out what the future of our city should look like, and mostly based on our lived experiences. So this was quite a big gap that we felt was kind of missing in the work and the way that we engage with designing our spaces. So this is mainly coming from the point of interest where we kind of see that we have lots of different incredibly written policies with very good intentions, but we don't necessarily know what the physical kind of spaces will look like in the future. So we all got together with different city people interested in development and in their communities who are doing really amazing work to kind of figure out using creative means to kind of have discussions, some debates, to see what kind of visuals we can come up with that represent the future of our cities. So I don't necessarily want to go long and talk about this work, but I'm more excited to kind of show you guys what we have been doing. So today we have the team that has helped to facilitate and conceptualize this whole project, which was a collaboration with Elefindo and Trinity Session. So we have the team here. We have Gabriella, I see Marcus, I think I saw Tammy, there's Pauline. So we have the team here that's very kindly agreed to kind of come back and give everyone a taste of what we have done throughout these studio sessions. And then we are going to share some of the visuals that we had developed from the city of Ekurhuleni. So we are here today just to kind of engage and have fun with this. So please feel free and welcome to contribute. We're just going to have a bit of fun this morning. And I'm really looking forward to kind of the conversations that this can spark, because I think some of what's emerged here is some really exciting tools that I think we as planners and city development practitioners can kind of use to think creatively about how to just talk to people and engage about their lived experiences and how we can use that to better the way that we design our spaces. So I'm just quickly going to hand over to Marcus and Gabriella, who's going to take us through a mini studio session for the city of Ekurhuleni, and we're going to design some stuff. We don't know what it's going to look like, but it's really based on everything that everyone in the session will kindly contribute. And please feel free and welcome to kind of just, contribute and speak, and just, don't be shy. We are really trying to have fun in this, but also to see how we can use kind of play and fun to create some really exciting and insightful pieces of work. So over to you, Marcus.
Thanks, Siwe. I'm very excited to be here today. So thank you for introducing us. Thank you for having us. Not only has it been an exciting year to pull together all this wonderful research, but I think we found a very fun and creative methodology to take people into our studios. So we're all artists, we're creatives, we're creative thinkers. We're coming from a pool of creative activities. And so what we're going to do right now is we're going to open our doors and we're going to welcome you into our studios. So you've now entered our studio. You're no longer in a webinar, you're no longer in a Zoom session, you're now actually physically participating in the studio. I think that's very important to note. Just on a little technical thing, so because it'll help, if you've got your little viewing options on Zoom, you've got a speaker view and a gallery view. If you set it onto gallery view, then you see all our faces. It's just something quite practical that means that you see all the different people doing things. And then what I will do is spotlight different videos when we need to see something specific. It just helps to see what's going on generally on the screen. It's just a bit more fun to see everyone participating. And we'll be using that as in the studio. So that all the formalities of Zoom have been adhered to. I think this is great. We can now get going. I'm actually going to get ready for the studio. Yeah, there we go. Let's get comfortable. Let's warm up. Gabby, do you want to welcome everyone from your side into the studio? Maybe introduce the rest of the team.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for all of you joining us today. I'm just going to ask if you are able to turn on your camera, because I always love seeing beautiful faces in the morning. So if you are able to turn on your camera, do so now. While you're doing that, I'm just going to introduce the team. So we've got Kyra, Tammy, and Pauline with us today, who are going to be our creative facilitators, and they're actually going to be capturing a lot of the information and the data and the interesting conversation we're going to have today. So as we go about it, I'll be checking in with the three of them, and they'll be showing us what we're doing. And this just is going to give you a little snippet of some of the things that we did during the visualization studio. And the beautiful thing about this process is that depending on who you have, it changes every time, these types of exercises. So it's really a unique experience every time. So I'm really looking forward to this one. One of the things that I am going to ask you to do just quickly, just so that we can all get out of the mindset of Zoom, which is, you know, I think we're all a little bit zoomed out, Zoom fatigue. I'm just going to ask you if you are able to just change your perspective slightly for just a second. Just if you can, if you're on a laptop, just maybe raise it to the roof or turn it a little bit, or just do something. You can go sit on the floor if you're able to. Whatever it is, that's why I'm asking you to put your screen on, and let's just get a different perspective of where everybody is.
If you've got a window, point it out the window.
Yeah, point it at the window, point it to your ceiling, point it to your toes, whatever is, but just move around a little bit and just get the different perspectives going, and let's see who we have in the room. You'll see if you are on the gallery view that we've got so many people that we've got 2 pages, so that's amazing. But yeah, it just helps to kind of, we're putting ourselves in a different perspective and we're entering our studio. So we're going to do some activities now, and they're going to require you to have your mute button off, and to also be closing your eyes. And we're going to transport ourselves to spaces today. That's why I wanted you to kind of get loosened up and ready. So one of the things I would like you to think about is a space that is a space for youth. And again, we start talking about youth, and there's different definitions of what is youth. You know, in South Africa, often it's 35 and under. Sometimes we talk about youth, it's 18 and under. But what is your definition in your mind of youth? And you're going to find a space that you're going to go to. So I want everybody to close their eyes now. And I'm also going to do it so you don't have to feel funny. So you're going to close your eyes. You're going to make sure that you are not muted, so that you're unmuted. And I want you to start immersing yourself into the space that you are in. Find that space that you feel that really is a space for you. And I want you to listen to the sounds that you hear. What can you smell? What can you touch, feel, the texture? What does the ground feel like? And really just take a deep breath and immerse yourself into that space. Take in all the senses. And as you get ready, I want you to call out the things that you can hear. And try and make the sounds that you can hear. And in no particular order, we can all kind of do it on top of each other. But what can you hear in your space designed for you? Space that exists.
So we're creating a sound landscape. So find the sound and repeat it over and over again. That's fantastic.
Well done, everybody. And now continue to keep your eyes closed. What I'd like you to do is call out the things that you can see, smell. Is there a special taste? Are there people around? What does this space look like? And I don't want you to call out the space, but describe it to me. And this, again, does not have to be in an orderly fashion. You can just call out when you're ready, when you feel something, when you have a sense. Grass.
Laughter in the background.
Water, eucalyptus, mountain, frogs.
Ground.
Water.
Breezy.
Very breezy.
There's a bridge.
People walking.
Yes, a breeze.
Very cloudy. Wind.
Trampoline.
Sitting.
Cloud.
Smell of rain.
Cheese curls.
Sunshine.
Water.
Chip packets.
Blue.
Children laughing.
Waves.
Jungle gym. Slide.
Eating.
Horse on the brace stand.
Picnicking.
Parents shouting.
Unicorns
and
rainbow.
Freeze.
Freedom.
Music.
School bell ringing.
A
Now,
bell
I would
ringing.
like you to also think about the
Checking.
posture.
And now what I would like you to do is I would like you to squint your eyes very tight. You're going to make your eyes tight, tight, tight. Now it's getting darker. So your space is now at nighttime. And I want you to describe what is the space, the same space that you were just in. The sun has gone down. What do you see? What do you hear? What is the feeling of the space?
It's cold.
Dark.
Lonely.
Pathways.
Tired.
right.
Dark and humid.
Comfort.
It's loud and it smells of smoke. Security guards.
Dark.
People walking.
Sounds of a cars.
Flickering lights.
Night activity.
Sprinklers.
Deserted.
Youth spaces.
Cold.
Laughter.
Now I'd like you to slowly open your eyes. Amazing. Thank you, everybody. That was amazing. And it's so beautiful to listen to those sounds that you created. So what I would like you to do now is we're going to still think about our space that we were just in. And what I would like you to do is I would like you to look around where you currently are, and you're going to try and find an object. Or if you don't have anything lying around, you can also draw a picture, or you can use your hands to create something. But what I'd like you to do, we're going to give you about maybe a minute and a half, 2 minutes to quickly hustle and get something. And that is going to be something that's going to represent something that you want to put into that space, something that you would like to add to the space that you feel that the space needs. So something symbolic that maybe, I'm going to give you an example. In my space, I'm going to be adding a book, and that represents something to me. So when you find an item that you would like to add into the space that you just were, you can think about your space during the day that you want to add. If you want to think about it in the evening, maybe there's something you want to add to it at night. So I'm going to give you, let's say, a minute and a half. I might be nice and give you 2 minutes. So you can leave your cameras on. You can leave yourself unmuted. It's fine. And go hunting for your item.
Okay.
I'm loving the views of some of the empty rooms.
So especially for this exercise, it does help for us to have our cameras on. I know some of you might be having some technical issues and sometimes the screen can't go on. So we're still trying to accommodate that through the chat function. But if you are able to turn on your screen for this exercise, it's quite helpful. It's nice to see people's objects.
So that surrounds them. And it's going to be very interesting now for you to maybe present those. We're still waiting for 1 or 2 people to join us. And what we're going to do as a presentation to start off with is we're going to bring them close to the camera just now and show everyone what we've chosen or what we'd like to represent. And with that in mind, we're going to be creating a collage of all the different objects that we're adding into the space before we go into any detail. So there are 1 or 2 people that we're still waiting for that are not on their screen yet. I think Siwe is one of them. And then what we'd like to do is for all of you to just bring the object close to the screen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be doing a screen grab. So I'm taking a photograph of the screen with all of the objects together to capture this collage.
Whenever you're ready, just hold up your object to the screen.
Get it close to the camera if you can.
Yeah.
We can all just see your objects. I see those with the virtual background are struggling a little bit. So if you, if you just hold it in front of you so that...
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to count down. Everyone hold up their objects. I'm going to count down from 3 and I'm going to take a photograph. Hold up your objects. 3, 2, 1. Wait, I'm going to do that again because something's changed. Be patient with me, please. Hold up your objects. I see some people are joining. It's fantastic. The more people that join, the better. And I'm going to go and I'm going to take another picture. There we go. Beautiful. And one more. This is like you're in a photography session. You're in a photo studio right now. Everyone's make sure your objects are smiling for me for a second, please. There we go. Fantastic. Thank you. So we've got a wonderful collage of different things that everyone's got with them. So I'd love for some of you to share what objects you brought into the room. Is there anybody that'd like to tell us why they brought a certain object into the space? I saw some really incredible creations.
Yeah, I brought a potted geranium because I like greenery. It's very peaceful. And this is what I imagine my space to be like, to have lots of different types of greenery.
Beautiful. And then can you share with us what your space was, where you went to?
Yeah, so my space was not enclosed, open space.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you got muted.
Oh, you're muted.
There you go. I can hear you now.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I ask you to hold the object up one more time while just so we can see it? Thank you.
You got
It. You are
For
muted.
some reason you're muted.
You're
again.
muted again, Zubaida.
Why is that happening?
see why. Okay.
Right?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Sorry. It's soft ground, open to everyone. At night, it's lit. Pathways are lit. There's different types of lamps. There's laughter. I imagine families and couples and friends gathering. It's not a space to be feared. It's a space to be enjoyed. It's a 24-hour space that welcomes everyone. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Anybody else that would like to share their object and explain to us?
I can go.
Okay, go.
Mine is my power bank, and it represents Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi everywhere. And I'm in a nature reserve, which is actually almost like in the middle of nowhere. I hear water, I hear birds, but there's Wi-Fi, surprisingly. There's perfect connectivity in the event that I get lost, which has happened quite a lot when I've gone hiking. I've gotten lost in a 10-kilometer hike has turned into a 20-kilometer hike. So yes, Wi-Fi, I can call anyone, I can text, and I can make it fun. So the other 10 kilometers, I'll be FaceTiming someone who can join me along the way. But yeah, it's a green space. It's a space of peace. It's a space of exercise. It's a space of just tranquility. And it's a space, it's surprisingly in the middle of the city, but you can still hear natural sounds. I love the sound of water. So you can still hear water, you can hear birds. Yeah.
Lovely. So I think next time you're going to have to be on your walk so that you can join us and we can all experience it with you, seeing that you have Wi-Fi wherever you're going.
Don't do that, because I'll actually do that, Marcus. 10 kilometers of FaceTime.
Okay, I can go.
Your hand up.
Yeah, so I've got like a gardening implement. I hope you can see. So I saw myself at my local park, which is an incredible space, lots of trees, lots of greenery, like ample play space, lots to do, like for an intergenerational kind of mix. You see families there, you see people walking their pets, children, but in as much as it's an incredible space, it has great potential, and some of it is kind of untapped, and it could be better. So I've got a garden implement because I feel like it would be a great space for some urban agricultural activity focused on children, just to strengthen that like education element. So play along with learning, and similar to the visualization studios, in a very fun, stimulating way. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you. Okay, do we have anybody else that would like to share their objects?
Yes, I can go. My one is a diffuser, because it's got this.
Hold it up a bit.
There we go. So it's got this very powerful and enticing smell, but also very natural smelling. So in my head, I was on the outskirts of the city. It was a riverbank with eucalyptus trees. I also had water, the flow of water downstream. There were frogs, there were fish, but I was alone and there was no one else. So just when I smelled this, it kind of reinforced that setting that I was in. So yeah, diffuser.
Lovely. Okay. Do you have anybody else that wants to share their objects with us? Don't feel pressure, but it'd be great.
Well, it's been quite interesting.
You've got one?
Well, it's been interesting so far. We've had these natural environments. So all of you chose something that is nature-based, which is quite interesting, even though we're dealing with youth spaces in semi-urban environments, I guess. And so, yeah, anybody else would like to share anything that might be in contrast or the same? It doesn't matter, but it would be lovely to hear some more.
Yes, I will go. Mine, I brought a torch. I'm in a city where there's load shedding, it's pitch black, so I need to illuminate my working area. That's why I brought the torch. Thanks.
Can you hold it up for us and shine it in our eyes, please? Thank you. There we go. Thank you for illuminating our spaces, because what happened now is your torch shone into our rooms. So
Anybody else would like to share their object with us?
So I'd like to add a twist to it. So for those of you that have either shared or still want to share, what I'd like you to do now is see if you want to choose something from someone else's screen, something that someone else presented, and you can add it to yours. So if you're thinking, I've got this object, but actually if I steal that person's torch, or if I take that person's something else and I combine it, maybe it'll improve my space even more. So think about that too as you're going. So you can either come back again if you've already shared, or if you want to start share your object and think about what you'd like to add from someone else, borrow from someone else. Let's not steal, let's borrow.
And also, if you're having any issues, you're more than welcome to put it into the chat function, what your object is that you have and what it means to you.
Yeah, there are a lot of people whose videos are off. You can also say them, explain it in audio.
And then in the chat, or if you're feeling a bit shy and you don't want to talk right now, you're more than welcome to use that medium as well.
Okay, I can come in.
Thank you.
So my object was this crazy hat, and it represents kind of performance space, or an informal kind of stage or something, because I know kids love performing, and when I was young, all we wanted to do was just climb up on a stage and pretend like you're a famous singer or something. And this would go in my space, which I chose as the beach, based in Cape Town. It's one of the best public spaces we have, and child-friendly spaces. But after reflecting how the space would be at night and how kind of dark and dangerous, deserted it is, I think I need to steal Rudzani's torch and bring in some light, so that we can use the space in the evening and the night, and it's safe for families and mums and kids to carry on using the space. So thanks, Rudadzi. I'm going to borrow your torch.
Great, so we've got some collaboration already happening. I like that. Any other collaborations on this horizon? Ayanda, I see you. Was that a yes? There you go.
Yes, hi. Mine was cotton wool. The space that I had chosen was also the beach, because for a very long time, the beach has just represented a certain level of softness and tranquility and safety. I've always felt safer when I'm by the coast, and I'd like to collaborate with the First Lady who presented a plant, because I would like for my beach to not only be sand and water, but I'd also love to have other green spaces that are functional and where people can have a wider form of interaction. Thanks.
Thank you. So the natural space.
I can share mine.
Sorry, is there someone else who would like to join?
Yeah, it's me, Marcus. I want to share mine quickly. So mine was this bottle of sprinkles. And because obviously I bake, that's why I just have sprinkles around. But mine was more to bring kind of color into spaces, because the space I was in was a playground in the inner city that's mostly like just gray and it's concrete. Just the colors are kind of drab. And so I just want to add some color into it, but also more to make it a space of not just where kids go to play, but to create. So some space to create. So that's why I would want to borrow from Spelele's gardening tool, so that there's some kind of activity or outcome that can come from you playing in that space in the city, and make sure that there's some color in there as well.
Right.
Yeah. And then I see here we've got had a water bottle. I suffer from anxiety and water really calms me down. So we want water in our spaces. We're going to add it in. It's a calming factor.
So there's also a reference to another torch. In the city that's experiencing load shedding, we need to create light. So Rudadzi mentioned that on the chat as well. So just for the fun of it, I am going to show you my background. So if I move out the way, I think that is a really fun collage already, just of various objects. I've got various screen grabs, and I'm just imagining all of these objects fusing together somehow to make a new kind of space of natural play, light, and exploration. And so what we've created in a very short time right now is the kind of collage and collaboration of different ideas around what these spaces are. So if anybody wants to still add to it, by all means, go ahead. You can still mention something. But I think at this point, I'd also love to draw some attention to some of the creatives that are in the background busy making stuff. So as I said, this is a studio, and we have artists in the studio busy visualizing what you've been talking about and your contributions as artists to their creations too. So we've all been collaborating on the screen. And I'd love either for Pauline, Kyra, or Tammy to tell me who's ready or who feels like they'd like to share something. Give me a show of hands. Let me know if you want. Kyra, you're good to go. Great. So everyone, this is Kyra, who's in the background been very busy. I saw that face kind of concentrating and doing things. So do you want to share with us what you've done?
Yeah, so today chose to work on just a flat surface, and my medium of choice has been every single type of tape that I could find in my studio. And for me, it was just a very simple connection between, I think, our tape holds things together, and I think the youth have the ability to hold things together, and we need to give their voices a chance. And that's one of the reasons we're here today. So just to show you what I've been working on, it's a little map collage. I started off with some basic bits of tape as streets. And for the street names, I started writing down all your positive sensations about your favorite imagined place. When you were asked to imagine that space in the dark, I wrote those impressions here, and I found some of them were quite ominous and scary. So I put some reflective tape around them so that we can be more aware of them and light them up a little bit. And then as you guys started bringing your objects in, and this is the fun part of these workshops, is trying to do this as quickly as possible for everyone. So I didn't capture everyone's object, but you'll see I've got our battery box with our Wi-Fi. I've got the crown for performance. I've got the bottle of sprinkles bringing some color and joy. I've got a nice big torch here, especially for load shedding. And then the torch sort of had babies and made a lot of street lights. I've got the potted plant here. Then I started building in this area, which is for agriculture and teaching the youth how to grow things. So you can see this is just sort of a diagrammatic representation of where we're going. I've added a river, even though I know we don't really have one in Ekurhuleni. But to give an alternative idea of what elements a city can be made up of.
Fantastic, thank you. And that in such a short space of time. Wow, that's great. Tammy or Pauline, have you got something you'd like to share?
Yes, I can show you. So I've been using this 3D pen, which is quite cool. You can draw shapes and then stick them together and make objects. So I've been doing quite an abstract little model of our conversation. Let me show you. So wow. it's very abstract right now. So I started with
paper. Do you have a piece of paper you can slide behind it, maybe, or something that you can see the? Hold on. It's the same color as your hand, so it's a bit difficult to see. There you go. That's a good idea. Yeah.
There we go.
There we go. Oh wow! Look at that. Can you lift it? Yeah. There. Great. Thank you.
So I started with this little swing because someone was speaking about jungle gyms. And then I added this little bird on top right at the beginning when we're doing the soundscape. I added the sunlight. Then I added sort of this piece at the bottom, which I started to create like a town square, but everyone spoke about natural elements a lot. So my town square has a leaf at the top here. This is my trident, which is actually the gardening tool. So that became a bit of a trident. Here I've got my Wi-Fi in the park and my light bulb, which was the torch, but I translated this into a light bulb. And this is sort of becoming a public square in a park, if you will. So everyone's been speaking a lot about public spaces and the need for that and wanting to spend more time in public. And on this side, I've got the little diffuser. Those are the reeds. I've got my water bottle. This is a water bottle. And I'm just going to add more onto this side and then hopefully build more vertical elements to this. So it becomes a little maze or just a weird little creature.
Fantastic. So I love the three-dimensional version and the flat version. Already there's a beautiful relationship between the two.
Yeah.
I know Pauline was struggling a little bit with her technology just now, but I don't know if you're okay there, Pauline. So I've got a thumbs up, so that's a good sign.
Marcus, if you could
unmute her. Yeah. That looks incredible what you've got going there. It's like a bouquet of color.
I think you have to unmute Pauline, Marcus.
I'm so sorry. I can only ask to unmute her. I cannot physically unmute her.
Can you hear me?
Now we can. Tell us.
Okay, I'm so sorry, everybody. I've got technical issues today. I'm building an amazing interactive playground that's playful, that's a safe space, and there was one lady who just said the word welcome, and that sort of is stuck out in my mind. So that's my big signpost at the moment that welcomes you to this amazing carnival of color and interactivity. And I've done a bit of a spin on old Christmas decoration chain where you use paper to chain things together to represent collaboration, because that's really what you guys are doing today. So your hat translates into something different, which then influences a chain of thought with your peers in the group today. So this has been really inspiring so far. Thank you very much.
I love your also notes on there that pick up on some of the concepts that were raised. It's not only just the objects themselves, but actually what they start representing. So I think this is what's so beautiful about this process is that everyone picks up different information and kind of compounds it together and brings it together. So thank you. I think all three of you have started to create these wonderful scapes, and everyone else has been so wonderful in collaborating. And I think we could carry on this process now, but the reality is we're supposed to give you a taste of what we did with the visualization studios and not go through a full session. Otherwise, we'd be sitting for an hour and a half to 2, maybe even 3 hours, as we have in many of the studios, and continuing this journey and making you run around and dance and do all kinds of fun things with us. But we're not going to be able to do that today because we just wanted to give you an impression of what it was. So to Tammy, Pauline, and Kyra, I'm very sorry to tell you, but this is as far as we're going to take your work today. Because I think we've reached the end of our little experiment and to illustrate to you how the visualization studios work. But I want you to all imagine what it would be like to then see these works unfold further and develop further and grow further. And so when Kyra holds up her map, for example, now, it starts to read as some kind of urban space. It can be read in so many different ways. You can annotate it. You can start handing this over and explaining it to someone what the story is about in the city or in these public spaces. If you think of Tammy's 3-dimensional object, each one of those things have got each one of the little arms have got something to tell. Pauline's chain has got interconnection of things that we can play with. So I hope you can see the beauty of some of these creations, that they're not just artworks, but they're actually signifiers and maps towards an incredible conversation that we've already just started to have. We've just scratched the surface. And I'm looking forward to actually seeing if we can't, at some point, take these conversations further with any of you as your interests are growing and and the opportunity comes up for us to do another visualization studio together. So thank you for being so bold and so generous with your videos and your objects and your ideas and your concepts. We just, as I said, touched the surface. A lot of the visualization studios went into much more emotional depth as well, where we really spoke about the difficulties, about the challenges, especially during lockdown. You can imagine the complexity of talking about future visions of a city and visualizing a city, and the lived experience was quite something. And so I think, Siwe, if you're right with this, I'd like to share what we did and some examples of some of the visualizations, especially around Ekurhuleni. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to just screen share for a second. So basically I'm taking over your screen for a moment, and I'm showing you a little summary of the visualization studio, kind of visualization studio document that is specifically around Ekurhuleni. As Siwe mentioned, we did this in 9 cities, and this is the focus one in Ekurhuleni, and you'll see some of the creative outcomes from these sessions. So I'll just jump into, there are 5 visualizations for Ekurhuleni that we did, and these are the 5 key ones, and then there are additional ones. And just to give you a sense of some of them, in this case, a piece of paper was the main space to be worked on. And as the conversation was going, using watercolor and pen, the journey was unpacked and the stories were told. And there were incredible stories that were being told that are then summarized in this image, that have everything to do with needing park benches to get space of perspective and comfort and understanding where we position ourselves in relation to the city. There were very philosophical ideas around framing of the city and using ideas of how do you, and you can see the little frames appearing in the picture there. There was the traditional and the natural. You see the little horns. Someone kept talking in that session about the symbolic wildlife as part of a presence in the city, and that one needs to not forget the true cultural and historical references to wildlife and what it means, and how we need to fuse the urban and the natural in a much more meaningful way. And then someone was talking about play and fun and said we should have trampolines throughout our city. And you can see these little pink squares in the drawings. And so you can see that there's incredible detail in some of this dreaming in the city and of what this city could become. You've got the little igloo type shapes there, which represent the huts of sorts that talk about a different architecture. You've got spaces for people to express themselves. And I mean, I could go into a lot of depth in each one of these visualizations, but I just want to give you a snapshot of how they evolved. And then you've got a layer of notes that goes with it. So you've got the visualization and then the notes that help inform that visualization, also creatively expressed. And then obviously a lot of detail. And each one of them can be seen in different ways. Similarly, I mean, this one was one that Kyra did, who you've just met, who did the wonderful map out of tape. And here she traced on her screen in acetate different concepts that were spoken about. And then she annotated them as well. So these different concepts were taken and then layered on top of each other using this acetate, this transparent material, to create new impressions of what the concepts were that were being discussed in the session. And you can see these beautiful drawings that are then individually very evocative and say a lot of things. But then when you start putting them together as layers, start to talk about the layered experience that we really had in these sessions. And I'm just giving you a snapshot of some of them. I'm going to take a few more minutes to show you some more because I think it helps to stimulate the mind in terms of what's potential. But just looking at that, you can see the complexity of the discussion. But you can unlayer it and you can unfold it in this book to discover the individual ones. And there was another tape city that she did in relation, similar to what we were talking about now, as one of the layers. And there they layered on top of each other, and you can see the journey. Then we had a really exciting other visualization, which was with Jacques Nel, who works on Sketchup, which is a 3D modeling tool. And so as the conversation happened, people spoke about different elements that they'd like to see in their city and how they'd like to change their city and what the potential combination of things could be. And we chose different sites that they could talk about. So in this case, we geotagged one of the sites. And interestingly enough, these were also natural sites that we spoke about. And then how do we activate these natural sites and what could we do? And someone spoke about putting a dome over them to protect them. Another person spoke about the rhythm and the music of the place. Others spoke about the need for water and the movement of water. Playgrounds were mentioned. I mean, you can see all these elements in the drawings and then how they came together by him taking objects and throwing them together. You have to understand here in this case, everyone's working very fast. So what happens is he goes into a library of existing shapes. And when someone talks about, for example, wind, he will see, or saying the movement of wind or something like that, he would find these wind twirly things, these toys, and kind of plonk them into the landscape. So he would creatively take action and find things that can help visualize what the conversation was about. And when you start looking at these things and you zoom into them and you walk through the space, you can imagine what this city could be or what this public space could be. And you can start to understand what we need to do to help it along. But what I really loved is that very simple symbolic things, if I can just jump back, like the big musical note, spoke about a cultural need to have rhythm and music and sound in one city. And this thing that moves through the space and holds it. So that the big oversized note is actually also a symbolic gesture, not just something that we can read quite easily, but it doesn't just stand for music, it stands for so many other things. And so again, we've got the recordings of these sessions, and what we then do is we can go back into those recordings and extract the content even more. But most importantly, I'm hoping that these visualizations evoke something in you, and you take your symbolic references and impose them on top of this, these sessions, these visualizations, sorry. And maybe two more. We've got Tammy's incredible map here of concepts that are interconnected with each other. They are kind of these interwoven and layered notes that are taken, where she's literally written down the different concepts that are mentioned and then mapped them on top of each other and collaged and cut them together with different shapes and sizes. And then you have this very beautifully layered, again, to peel away expression of interconnectivity and concepts that are there. And what's really beautiful is when you take it and you hang it in front of a window, like you can see on the left-hand side there, the light comes through from behind, and it gives the whole visualization a completely another meaning. So if you imagine hanging this in front of a park, for example, you'd have the green of the trees coming through. If you're hanging it in front of an urban space or a set of buildings, you've got a completely new meaning to what this map is about. So it's very much also about an object that can have different meaning in different spaces. And then Pauline, who you've seen create, now has created an incredible installation around the concept of future tellers, where the workshop was all about the question of imagining one's future and reading one's ideas of the future city, and looking at narratives and challenges, and built this insane installation using all kinds of objects and notes and tools, and yeah, you can see it. So her whole space, her whole studio, or her living room in this case, I'm not quite sure what that space was, is transformed into the most magical environment. That if you think about it, that is an image, as a visualization. If you were to step into that and you were to be immersed in this experience, this would be a way of summarizing a collaborative conversation in a completely new way. So imagine you walked into a room like this and said, this is a visualization that transports you and transforms you as an individual into understanding a completely new context and seeing your future city in a completely new way and being able to add to it. So the important thing about these is that each one of these visualizations can be added to. They are open for interpretation in so many different ways, and you've got some interpretation listed here, and they can be taken into so many different directions, such as, for example, these galaxies of concepts, and then everyone else can obviously add to them as they like and as they can. And so I think I'd wrap it up for here. I think I've spoken a lot, and I'm going to wrap it up with one last visualization that links to what you've all just done, and that is this one here, which is this city of objects, which is specifically to say the beauty of what we had is exactly like you went and found one object. We asked some people to go and find a whole myriad of objects and build their own city in their own environment. And so what you have here are people's homes being transformed into little mini cities where each object represents something different, and they spend time talking about what these objects are. And I think that journey of actually creating your own visualization through objects around you will never allow you to look at those objects the same way. So I'd like you to take the objects that you've got with you and cherish them, put them on your desk, and acknowledge that they are very important for you in terms of understanding your own future visualization of your city. So I hope that gave you a snapshot into our journey. If there are any questions or comments, I think this would be a good time, but I also don't want to, I think I've gone over time already with our session. So I think I'm going to keep quiet now. Thank you, Gabby. Thank you, team. This was amazing. I hand that back over to you.
Thanks so much, Marcus. I think Pauline's still on Spotlight. I don't know.
Oh, sorry about
Pauline's comfortable with that, then that's fine. But thank you so much. So Marcus, you actually haven't gone over time. We do have a little bit more time. So we can stay with the visualization studio for a little bit longer. And perhaps we can hear from Siwe now, who's really the kind of convener of this project and has brought this incredible team together. So Siwe, maybe just we can end off with some reflections from you on what this process has been like, and maybe a little bit about what was particular or specific about the Ekurhuleni studio compared to the other cities. So yeah, thanks, Siwe.
Thanks, Kyra. Yeah, so just picking up on some of the key elements that Marcus was speaking to with regards to the particular visualizations, I think some of the most striking themes that came out for me from the city of Ekurhuleni was this notion of kind of public space and this need to, I remember someone was saying that one of the things I don't like about the park is that it's fenced and that it comprises this notion of accessibility and that it's, you know, it should be transparent so everyone can have access to it. And also the issue of safety and security. I think the dome was in that park that we were kind of visualizing on was specifically about that sense of needing to be sheltered and to have that feeling of safety within the city and especially within public space. But also very interestingly for me, I think is this issue of kind of development and how it links to spaces of healing. Someone says, I think we have built and physically developed so many buildings and we can stop now. We have what we need. People need healing for us to experience our places better. And I think that really just speaks to kind of the intangible of the city. So what kind of relations do we have between our families and communities, and how we relate to the people that are kind of holding the power to design these kinds of spaces. And really what I'm trying to kind of get into now is to say, from all of these debates and conversations that we had from these particular sessions, what are the values and principles that we want to see kind of physically manifest in our spaces? Are we saying our spaces need to be community orientated, they need to be kind of free for everyone, but what does that look like once it's translated into a design? So I'm kind of interested now to actually hear from people within the city of Ekurhuleni that have joined us in this session. If you can allow me, Kyra, to just hear if you have any kind of thoughts and reflections on what we have presented in terms of the kinds of themes that we are picking up from particularly the city of Ekurhuleni, from the sessions and the kinds of conversations that we've had. Do you see some kind of relation to what kind of the city has in mind for what is planned, but also are there any kind of provocations in terms of what is missing or what you disagree with in terms of some of what we've presented today? So just to hear, are some of your thoughts on the future of your city kind of reflected in some of the visualizations that we've shared today? And if there are any kind of reflections, we'd love to have that, and really happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, won't be putting in my video. I'm not feeling well, and so to Kyra, it sort of distorted my facial expression. Be that as it may, I'm happy to be a part of this as Ekurhuleni, as city planning, as part of the built environment, and also I think being female. And so the reason I say this is that I found my city to be a him. I find it masculine in the sense. And it all has to do with the challenge that the city is wide. The city has a width and a breadth that is unimaginable. You could still be driving around for an hour and a half and you're still within the city of Ekurhuleni, trying to get from the very edge, let's say, around the Tembisa area, if you just cross over from Allendale and trying to travel all the way to Springs. And I find that for me, it's a bit of a challenge to then experience the city fully, to experience the city comfortably in my high heels, and to also experience the city safely on my own. Because as you get through from one area, from one corridor to the next, or one node to the next, it is a hell of a mission. Even for me, as head of department, I've got people who sit in Nigel, in Springs, in Brakpan, Benoni, Kempton Park, Edenvale, Germiston, Tembisa. So you can imagine trying to have meetings and the traveling. What is it that it entails? So I'm sorry, no offense to the gentleman, but that's why I feel it's a masculine urban build for me. And I try to work as hard as I can to sort of change that. And so even little things like urban management, in your high heels when we're moving from headquarters where the city manager's office is, and we park our cars and we walk across the road to where the executive sits for a mayoral meeting, and your heels get stuck between the pavement blocks. What does that tell you? So no doubt as well, when you sit in the public open spaces, I hear the issue of safety. But for me, being a girl and going for my monthly facials, am I comfortable? Is there enough shade amongst the trees or the shrubs that were meant to be there and not taken because there's an informal settlement nearby and they see that as mechanisms or tools for livelihood, to make fire, to make food, because they don't have electricity, given the illegalities. So it's very interesting being in this space and working within it, because I'm sure to all of you, before we became the city of Ekurhuleni, we were the East Rand, right? I think a lot of you remember that. And I must say this properly. It's not Charlize Theron, it's Charlize Theron. Nee, and say Komfan Pinoni of Boksburg in Ekurhuleni. So that at least put us in the map in a way. Not even a lot of people knew that the OR Tambo International Airport is in our city. Even though when you're sitting in the aircraft, aviation will say, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Johannesburg. So it's taken us a lot of work, and more so for me personally, to say, I don't work in the East Rand. I don't work surrounded by mining dumps and industries. We do have high-rise buildings. There are places where you can go for a brunch, you can go for a massage, and there is a hotel that also competes with the likes of what is graded in Sandton and City of Tshwane, around where Mainland Mall is. So we are a city that has enormous capability. 52% of our land is dolomitic. So what remains with a 48% that's developable? We rely on you guys to come in with the innovation. It then becomes a test for those of us on board, Rodzani is on board, Nobuzo on board, to say, how then do we accommodate this in a financial year or in our regional spatial development frameworks? And how do we make our town planning schemes robust? And where we are now coming in with bulk contributions, how much can we charge developers so that they start to reinvest in public open spaces? For example, it's also quite sad that we have this kind of story moving from the East Rand, an amalgamation of 9 towns, into a city that is wanting to be competitive with other cities in South Africa, all the 8 metros, other cities in Africa and beyond. And how do we tell our story? How do we move forward? So when it comes to publications, I find we're very thin. And I am hoping we will have a sexy library in the manner that the South African Cities Network has. And then also in our KPIs, because as head of departments, we are there for a 5-year term. So in order to ensure that there is sound deliverables from the contract that you're in for the next professionals to inherit, how do we keep a story of our city with publications? So we tried very hard with the planning festivals within the city, and I will always do this to thank my team. So again, to thank them as we sit on this platform for what it is we were able to pull and the support that we got from people like you to then birth this into something meaningful. We didn't know what we were doing, but we wanted to put our story out there and post these sessions to sit with you and say, okay, this is what we think you ought to do going forward, and this is what we need to work on as a collective, perhaps every 6 months, so that next time, this year, next time, or in my final year of contract, we can sit back and say, we did shape the built environment. In addition to this is that we lack certain skills. I know I am overwhelmed with the doodles that Kyra will do, and I would want to know, how do we learn that? But we also don't have as much experts on specific topics to be able to engage better with you, to complement, and also to compete. And that is something I am dying for. And I'm hoping that being a BATE member also opens up for that kind of teaching from yourselves, given the experience that you have across South Africa, across the continent, and also the rest of the world. So that is the story from me about my boy, Ekurhuleni. I don't know, Rudadzi, if you also want to come in at this stage. Thank you. Thank you, Siwe.
Thank you, Palesa. Can I just jump in here before we get some inputs from Rudadzi? I'm very curious. It sounds like what you were describing there is kind of the personality of the city, which is one of the exercises that we did actually in many of the studio sessions. So I'm quite interested to hear just even from all of the panelists in the webinar today. So Palesa has described that the city is quite masculine. It doesn't have a lot of shade. It's more like a shadow of another city. Maybe it's going through a transition and maybe an identity crisis. So I'm just quite curious to hear now, what is the future personality now of Ekurhuleni? Is it outspoken? Is it confident? Is it maybe now the gender will transition and be more maybe intersectional kind of in its identity? It will be a free kind of person. So if the city was a person that you know or that you would want to know in the future, what other personality traits that the city would have? So if you could all just kind of write maybe 1 or 2 words in the chat to describe the future city, that would be great for us to hear from you. But I'm happy to get some inputs from you as well, Rudadzi. Thank you.
And maybe just to add one thing from the Ekurhuleni session that we found, and I think, Palesa, what you were bringing up is very interesting, because a lot of the current feeling that we got from participants was around disconnection and sort of the fact that spaces were, kind of lumped together, but they don't flow as well, similar to what you're saying. And I love the idea of you talking about the masculine city, maybe the sort of idea of not sharing feelings and being very sort of in the way that it's planned. And a lot of I think the wishes and the personalities that were put forward in the previous sessions that we did, and even the conversations in the open studio sessions, was really about how does one create softer lines and connections between spaces and different people. So I think what what the participants were talking about and what you're talking about is very similar. So it's interesting to see the comparison, and that it's kind of runs through all the different people.
Okay, thanks. For me, I think when we started the session, we were requested to close our eyes and try to have some visuals of our own space. And I think it's important within cities to have that visualization in terms of where are we taking our city into. As city planning department, we also started with creating present plans, which in a way started to bring that sort of visuals to show that our area, in terms of changing those areas, that are going to look in this fashion. So it is important, I think, with the work that, or the experiments that we were shown today in this session, that with that visualization, you are able to facilitate and have a common sort of understanding of the nature of how your city will look like. So it is very important that as we move as planners, we do more of this visualization, 3Ds, and see how the transformation will look like in an actual fact. So we must start with that visualization, so that we then translate it into the actual environment that will then, give the transformation that we want. Because in policy terms, some of these things you don't necessarily visualize. But if you start doing models and model how this will look in the actual environment, that will also play an important role. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rudadzi. And Siwe, I think you've done such an incredible job just combining all of these perspectives, you and of course the whole team. So lastly, maybe we can just hear from you kind of what's next for the studios. You've hosted 9 studios in the cities, and it's been a huge amount of work. I think you've condensed so much. It's almost been a repository of just so much information, and really, really good, useful information for planners as well, because it gives us an insight into what citizens are feeling on a very deep and emotional level about their city and how they want to shape their city and what they want to see for their city going forward. So what do we do now? We've got all of this unbelievable visuals and ideas and thoughts and experiments, and the next job, because the Visualization Studios project is not over. It's only just begun, actually. So where to from here?
You're right, Kyra. There's actually, a lot of content, and I think the team kind of, was also overwhelmed in terms of, how to condense all of this, how to present it in a way that can be understood by people who weren't necessarily in the studios. But also importantly, I think kind of as a next step is also for us to kind of reflect on this process and see basically what kind of insights are coming out from each of the cities, but also now to understand more on kind of what are the practical tools that we can put together in a package for city practitioners who are engaging with communities, with the people that they are planning with. So whether, even if it's not necessarily the community, but also how to relate to developers, how to relate to the private sector, and bring all of these voices together in one room. So I think it's more also about changing the way that we speak to each other. I think this kind of democratizes kind of this language that we normally can be quite alienating to people outside of the development space. So I'm currently working now to kind of put together a toolkit that we can kind of give to people who weren't necessarily in the studio session or part of the process, who can use some of these tools that we had in the session today, but also kind of working. So there were quite a few children in one of the studio sessions. I think for the city of Joburg, we had a whole family in the session, which was really exciting. And they kind of brought together kind of a very different perspective on, what is the space for families and children in the city, because there's kind of a lot of conceptions that it's not a space for children. So now how do we design spaces that are more welcoming to children and can allow them to be children in the city? So kind of at the moment conceptualizing a project with Spelele, who's on the call today, to think through what are some of the measures that we can, measure kind of child safety in the city. So what are some practical things that children identify with or need in cities to make them feel safe? So I think it's also, we're still in the process of kind of thinking through all of this content, but really welcome some feedback from everyone who's here today in terms of how they think they can use this process, how they think we can help each other to kind of figure this out, and using all of these different kinds of tools to think better, but more broadly about, just opening up the conversation on who kind of gets to set the agenda for the kind of spaces that we design. I see Gabriella has a hand up. I think you might have something to add. That would be great.
Thanks, Siwe. I think one of the things also to highlight is that this was very much an experimentation process, because originally we were meant to be doing this physically. This was meant to be a physical process, and because of COVID and everything that happened, we then had to shift our focus and look at the virtual aspect, which of course comes with its own difficulties, connectivity, various different things of that. I can't actually exchange something with a human or have tea and coffee and still have that dialogue. So I think we've learned a lot through this process, and I think I can speak for the team. We're really excited about how we've managed to create this dialogue, and that we only scratched the surface with it. Because we had to do 9 cities, you know, we could only spend so much time on each city. So I think there's a lot of themes that have come out for each of the cities, and now we could actually start diving deeper into those themes and start really unpacking the various different things that have come out of each city. So I think for all of us, we were quite excited to look at how we can dive deeper, how we can work with individual cities, and sort of expanding this process and being able to sort of spend a bit more time on each city. But also one of the things that we have put forward is how do we take some of these visualizations and turn them into public art or elements where the public can engage with them, also to create interactive dialogue, which I think one of the things that came out of this is the type of conversations. And we really tried to look at the visualizations that would be able to be added onto. So none of these are the final products. There's more that comes with it. There's more conversation that needs to be had. And hopefully we can look at how do we do that in the various cities as well as Ekurhuleni. So it was a really fascinating. I learned so much from this process. And I just want to thank, you know, Ziwe and everybody that's made that possible.
Thanks, Gabby. And Marcus, do you have anything else to add at this point? You've also been part of this from the beginning.
Well, I think the crux of what Gabby mentioned about the physical space is one that we had the incredible opportunity, given all the complexity that was going on, to enter into people's homes. Now, you know, in the past, we would have never had that opportunity. Zoom is just one platform, and we were on WhatsApp and having dialogues on WhatsApp. We collected content from people. People sent us pictures and notes and drawings and concepts. And all of it happened because of a condition and a pandemic and a situation where people needed to feel connected. And it grew out of a very meaningful exchange where people actually almost using this as an opportunity to reflect on their own existence at a certain time. And I think that was what made this process so powerful at the time that it did. And it's given rise to us now looking at each other on the screen. But the next step to that is this acknowledgement and the reality that, you know, we still want to shake each other's hands, and we still want to be in each other's presence, and we still want to be in the studio getting our hands wet and dirty as artists. You know, it's all this digital technology is great and it provides certain things, but the physical is really something else, and it'll give rise to new concepts and new ideas that emerge out of these. And I'm really excited that we were able to tap into people's homes and personalities and personal experiences. Because so quickly, when we talk about city thinking and big structures, we zoom out and we look at it from the outside, and we don't delve deep into that personal, emotional state that we are tapping into in a lot of these visualization studios. These are very complex concepts. These are very emotional and personal moments, not only for the participants, also for the facilitators. You know, we try to connect with people, and we start to realize that these are almost like strange therapy sessions, if I may say that, you know, where we contemplate our lives. And I think we shouldn't take that too lightly, and we should acknowledge that the depth of this is not about interpreting it only about, oh yes, we need more park benches, or oh yes, we need some more water fountains, or whatever. I don't know, I'm talking very practically now. But that we actually need to think about the emotional state of the citizen and the participant, and what is it that we can insert into the physical environment that can start help reflecting on that. And that's the point around Gabby's comment about seeing what would happen if we physically manifest some of these visualizations. You know, if we actually take some of these attempts and these concepts and we activate public space through, you know, the flash mob concept is one very simplified concept that's happened all over the place. But what if we take some of the true meaning of what came out of this, and we actually install temporary things in different spaces and ask people to respond, participate? And I think that for me is really the wealth and the richness of this, is that we're taking the inside and the emotional and the personal, and we're taking it into the public space, and we're asking for others to plug into that space, not to try and design the city from the outside. And so for that point of view, I must say I've grown immensely, because as an artist, it gave me a connection to people that I've always wanted to connect with. But if you do a workshop in public space or in a studio, there's a hierarchy, there's a complexity, there's all kinds of things that break down. But the moment someone opens up the emotional home to you, you have a completely new connection. And I think we should foster that connection and grow that into a new strategy for research. And that was what I think we've discovered in this journey, and I'm hoping we can take it forward. So thank you from my side on that.
Thanks a lot, Marcus. It's so wonderful that you and Siwe and Gabby and the artists, the whole team, have been able to join us today and give us a little taste of what the studios have been about. And I think specifically in this conversation, which is about youth, I think as planners and when we're planning for youth, we don't often do it with empathy, and we work in very serious adult hierarchical ways, unemotional ways, which might be necessary to get things done. But we forget to access some of those very useful aspects which are inside all of us, no matter how old we are. And this has been such an exciting reminder that there are other ways of engaging that are deeply creative, that are fun, collaborative, and very useful. So thank you so much for sharing. We will now have a 5-minute break to take us to 11:30 or 11:32, when we can come back, and we'll go into part 2 of the session, which will be the informal discussion with some of our panelists, old and young, experienced and new, and students. We have a wonderful panel joining us. So take a quick body break, and we will see you back in 5 minutes. Thank you, everyone. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I hope everyone had a good short break, and I'm still seeing Siwe's screen as pinned. So maybe if we can all change our view to gallery view, that would be good. Okay, I hope everyone is back. So now we're going to commence with our second part of the session, where we get to discuss with each other and reflect on what we've been through. And we're going to shift the conversation slightly to the theme around youth and the role of youth in spatial transformation. And often we talk, in terms of planning, we talk about youth and planning for youth and youth development, but we forget that municipalities are made up of youth themselves, and young planners are often the ones who have the energy to do the challenging work and have the challenging conversations to begin to shift the institution and to make the kinds of transformation in space that we all want to see. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Sipilele from the South African Cities Network to moderate this conversation. So Spay, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Kyra, for steering us so well. And yeah, also for a very insightful visualization studios experience. I think that brings us right into this conversation, which centers around youth and their role in spatial transformation. So I think it was a great, this is going to be a great segue into a more in-depth conversation. So this afternoon, is it still morning or afternoon? So this morning, we're going to be having an intergenerational conversation. I don't know how intergenerational it is because the people that I have on my list that are panel members that represent more experience in the field and more experience in the space aren't very high on the age spectrum either. So I think it's still a youth conversation, but intergenerational youth conversation. So I'm very excited about that. And just to maybe quickly introduce our panel today before we dive into the conversation, we have Munyake Muteane, who is the urban specialist at the World Bank, supporting the urban team with advisory services, engaging with National Treasury's City Support Program on human settlements and urban resilience. He is also the winner of the inaugural Young Planners and Designers competition, which took place in 2018. And I think what led to that is that he brought like a wealth of perspective and such a strong argument, and I'm hoping that we can dive into some of those concepts that he introduced today. Secondly, we have Zubeida Lawton, who is the winner of the second Young Planners and Designers competition in 2020 and a PhD candidate in the University of Glasgow. Also some very practical spatial interventions proposed by Zubeida in her essay, and I'm hoping to converse with her about that today. And then from the city of Ekurhuleni, we have Mr. Rudadzi Mabaso, who is a development planner and experienced in various fields. He wears various hats and expert on issues of spatial analysis, planning, urban development, infrastructure planning, financing, governance, strategic planning, and so on. So someone who is quite experienced and who are hoping to draw some very rich perspectives from, just to give us perspective from the more experienced planner side. Mr. Mabaso is a senior manager for spatial policy and development research within the city planning department in the city of Ekurhuleni. Next, we have Ms. Palisa Tsita, who is the head of department for city planning in the city of Ekurhuleni. She also brings a wealth of experience, over 20 years experience in the built environment. And so we're hoping for some great reflections from her as we go along. And then last but not least, we have on our panel Ms. Khuluhelo Mokgere, who is with the South African Cities Network as a research intern and is spearheading the intervention or young planners and designers competition. And I think she brings also a wealth of perspective from that experience, and we're hoping to talk to her about that today. So without further ado, and I think we have an hour, am I correct, Kyra, that we can wrap up at about 12:30?
Yeah, yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so how we're envisioning that this conversation will unfold is that, of course, I'll just bring us in and just ask the initial questions. And then I may bring Kyra in at some stages just for her reflections and her inputs as well, given that she is coordinating the built environment integration task team. And from that perspective, I think she also brings an important perspective into the conversation. I'll also be opening up for questions and interaction from the audience. Please feel free to place some of your questions into the chat. I may also invite some voiced questions, comments as well, and then we'll move back to our panel members for some closing remarks. So just to get started, I think we could start with Munyake. The first question, I think, just as a segue and reflecting back on what we've seen from the visualization studios, I think this goes for each member of the panel. If you could just, in about 20 seconds or so, give us your reflection of the future city, your take, your ideal city. So moving out from what we did in the visualization studio experience of talking from like a very micro level of one particular space in a city that you see yourself in, just a reflection on a broader city, what your vision is of the future city, your reason for doing really in your various spaces. And yeah, just as I think it links us very nicely from the first session to the next session. So I'll start with you, Munyake, and I guess we will follow just the order in which I introduced yourselves. I'll prompt you, of course, as soon as the one speaker is done. So if you may come in, Munyake, on that check-in question, and then, yeah, we'll take the conversation from there. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Spare, and good day to everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here. Munyake Mutiani here, Urban Specialist. So in terms of vision for a future city, I think there's a growing need to have cities to become more people-centric. I think that's kind of the emerging trends from both literature, I think also from people's lived experiences as well. That, you know, having cities as these mechanical, concrete, car-orientated blocks is just failing us tremendously. And I think something like COVID has probably just exposed this bad practice of focusing more on the mechanical and the structural and less on the people, because more and more we've seen the need for people to go outside and engage in an environment where they have to be confined for quite a substantial time within their spaces, within their four corners of their houses. So spaces really have to be reimagined in a way that, you know, we narrow what is for the car, and then we actually give more or apportion more of that space to people. So that for me would be my future city. And then there's a number of ways that we can actually tackle that elephant. I mean, the one is looking at public spaces, taking less, taking more from the car, so a reduction in lanes, narrowing that, and focusing more on NMT type, non-motorized type interventions. So that for me is probably a low-hanging fruit. The second would be just ensuring that we create good public spaces geared for more and enriched interaction between people, intergenerational, different stratas of our demographics. So me, just to sum it up, it will be a more people-centric city. That's my future city. Thank you.
Wonderful stuff. Thanks, Mnyake. Cities for people. I think that's a great one, particularly when we talk to our reasons for doing. I think at the center of it, of course, is that so that cities are livable for people. And I think sometimes that gets lost in translation when the forms of delivery, the forms of doing seem to embody something else other than what is at the center. And I think that's a wonderful way to open. And I will now move along to Zubeida to come in on the same question, just to vision and bring us into the picture of how she envisions what cities should be fundamentally about, and of course, the future city.
Thank you for the question. So this actually resonates very well with my own doctoral research, which focused on social and spatial transformation of South African cities. So my vision would be to make the city a space where people want to be, because a lot of the time people use the city and they leave. I envision the city as a space like a shopping mall. It's a place where you want to go. You choose to go to the city because there's things to do, there's public spaces, there's facilities, and it's about connecting people. So very often people go to a space, they stay within their own social groups, they don't interact with those around them. And I envision a city where you can sit on the bench and you can have a discussion or a chat with a complete stranger, and you can start to build relationships with South Africans in public spaces, so you can overcome the divide, the emotional divide or the mental divide that still exists. And in doing so, you'll have cities where people will choose to be on public holidays. South Africa has many public holidays. So I think that is a key area where we can start to bring people into the city, have events for Youth Day, for Heritage Day, for the festive break. People love celebrating. And now with COVID, it's an opportunity to have a blank slate. Now we can start to reintroduce people into the city because COVID confined people. So now they want spaces where they can go out, they can meet people, they can socialize. And this presents a great opportunity in which we can start to re-envision what our cities will be like. Thank you.
Thanks, Zubeida. Wonderful way to get us started as well. So cities, like moving away from viewing our cities as transitional, and I think it has a lot to do with how we then interact with the space, whether we feel connected to the space or disconnected, in that we can then litter and so on. And so when we start to view space as something that can drive social cohesion, drive well-being and so on, and be integrated and mesh with culture and so on, I think that's a great vision for the city. And without spending too much more time, I would like to invite Rudadzi just on the check-in question to give us his perspective. Welcome, Rudadzi.
Thank you. For me, I think when you look where we come from since 1994, in terms of our cities, they're still relatively young. So this discussion today is happening in the right moment with the view of getting the voices from the youth and young people in the city. For me, I think what is important in terms of the future city is to see cities that are inclusive, with strong social cohesion, that will also promote economic growth, and at the same time protect the environment to the benefit of all in cities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rudadzi, for being short and sweet there, but very impactful. I think I like the aspect around protecting the environment and developing our cities in ways that are conscious of our non-renewable resources, of course. And Palesa, I would like to invite you now just to put us into the picture of your future city. Hello, Palisa, you might be muted. Okay, maybe let's come back to Palisa in the next round.
Okay, apologies. I just had to take a call from headquarters.
Okay.
I'm with you now.
All right, Palisa, shall we come back to you?
Okay, what was the question?
Okay, so it's a check-in question, just flowing from the previous session that we had with the visualization studios. We just want a sense of what you imagine or what you would like the city of the future to look like. So just a reflection taken from the visualization studios about the future city.
I'm ready.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay.
Just in 20 seconds.
All right, there's young professionals on board, and I think I'm going to score brownie points where I say I want a city that is Wi-Fi'd 24/7, right? And then Rudadzi is going to be a little bit embarrassed around this, but we have our offices in Kempton Park, and between our offices and the airport is an informal, what you would call red light district. So instead of going there with all the inspections and draining my efforts, I think we should just formalize this thing. So that is what I am also wanting to see, a city that embraces the formalities and the illegalities. For example, red light district in the Kempton area. Sorry to the young ones if this is too adult. And then because of the way we are working with the COVID-19, I don't see us doing high-rise buildings because we all work from home now. But what I definitely do see is open spaces that are Wi-Fi'd, and it is lots of cafes. I know Kayla and her coffee, myself as well. It is also amphitheaters. Somebody spoke about the festive season coming up, and it is also spaces where we can all play, but then be together, given the COVID pandemic, okay? So then the other thing that I do see, and I want to challenge all planners, is that I really see a new thinking around informal settlements. So one of the exercises we needed to do as local government to respond to the disaster of the pandemic, we had to de-densify informal settlements. And I don't know about you, Rudadzi, I then see the whole thinking of urban design and policies then shifting back to settlement planning, and that would be how we then change the landscape. Because we realize that in the manner in which informal settlements are designed and densified, there's a risk of spreading the COVID-19. So we need to go back there and make our informal settlements safe. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I think you've given us quite a comprehensive view of the city, from the need to be more progressive and around informalities. I think that's a very important one, particularly as we are in the African and in the global South context. I think that is something that resonates with more of our experiences of our cities. And I like what you bring, and excuse us if this is maybe just like adult content as well, but I think thinking progressively about sex work and how you can, and how cities can also leverage that and formalize that, so it's not so much an antisocial activity. So I think you've brought us into the thick of the discussion already, just with your check-in, which was very powerful. And thank you for that. So I think that brings us to a point where we can now dive into the conversation, and maybe I'll just go into conversation with each of you. I'm so sorry. Have I been muted all this time?
Sorry, Spade, that was my fault. I just muted you quickly.
Did you hear me though?
Yes, no, we heard by mistake.
So maybe I was muted.
But I wanted to say, can we hear from Klulu as well?
Oh yes, sorry about that, Klulu. I took a check-in from everybody except my one panel member. So if we could have a check-in from Klulu of her vision of the city, and then we'll dive into the rest of the conversation. Please come in, Klulu, and apologies for that.
No problem, Spay. I guess I would say I agree with a lot of the points that have already been made, but I would want to sit on Rudzaini's word of inclusiveness, and just also reflecting on the alternative method of, communicating and engaging with people. and to say that, we need a city that's more responsive to the underlying socioeconomic issues of people. So recognizing that people feeling disconnected to the city or not having the city be safe, that those are results of, people being unemployed, not being involved, not being able to, intentionally co-create public spaces or even be involved in programs that they're the beneficiaries of, whether it's a youth employment program or a program that's intended to empower women, but doesn't really understand the kind of, dynamics in an environment that would be suitable and would be actually intentionally and deliberately empowering to women or people with disabilities. So I think the future city for me is co-creative and inclusive and quite deliberately responds to underlying issues. Yeah, I'd really say that, the socioeconomic issues that lead to numerous other psychosocial things and result in the lack of safety and high crime numbers and gender-based violence, increasing rates of femicide, and even how people approach their everyday practices. So how do we really tackle that social element and how we're socialized? Yeah, and that's quite a intense conversation around, ECD, and then thinking around how do we make sure that the employment programs or community development is actually effective to make sure that those communities are homes and people have buy-in and have ownership in those spaces and those parks, that, that the state or local government doesn't develop things that are later vandalized. So how do we make spaces and places responsive so that people feel like they're a part of them, that they can own them?
Yeah, so a very important point around how do you engage communities so that they feel like they own processes and the outcomes thereof. And I think you bring in a really important perspective around why then things that are delivered sometimes get vandalized because it doesn't resonate with communities as something they own. So really being practical around what it means to include and the impacts that whether you exclude or include, that can have throughout the life cycle of a person living in the city. So very important to have interventions around ECD that will have lifelong impacts as well. I think, yeah, I'm very impressed with our panel that in a very short check-in, they've been able to give us such rich inputs and perspectives. And maybe just to drill down to some of the individuals that we have on the panel here, maybe if I may start with yourself, Zubeida. So you are the winner of this year's Young Planners and Designers competition, and you propose some very, very practical spatial interventions, particularly around urban connectivity. And these interventions are something that I felt when interacting with what you wrote could be things that could be implementable even more immediately, like that show a very clear understanding of what some of the governance aspects are that translate into space as well. So I wanted you to just talk to us about some of the solutions. You talked about your vision for the future city, and what are some of the things you think are important? What are some of the components that we could be applying to get there? And I think your essay already puts us or gives us a very clear perspective, and I think very practical perspectives. Maybe if you could talk more to that.
No problem. So one of the things that I actually wrote about in my essay was safety, and that has been brought up quite often. But safety is one of those things that you can't ignore, and it has to be, in terms of the security measures you implement, needs to be more proactive as opposed to reactive. Because you don't want people to feel like they're constantly being watched 24/7, but you do want them to know there are safety measures in place so they can use the space freely. So once you're able to tackle safety and security issues, people will start to be comfortable in spaces. That is one of the things that I said was really big. Another part of urban connectivity that I felt very strongly about was creating multifunctional spaces. So the city predominantly is a space where people go to work and then they leave. Some aspects have residential, some have social. But if we're able to tap into those spaces, for instance, parking lots work great during working hours. But what happens when it's empty over the weekend, on public holidays, after hours? Why not convert those spaces to a farmer's market or a youth corner where youth can come and sell products, or the informal sector can set up pop-up stalls? And so it's a space that will function at different times of the day, cater to different people, and attract a different demographic to the city. So the city is constantly busy, it's constantly being used, and it's not a space that will be isolated. Because even if you have security measures in place, an isolated space will still feel unsafe. So there's no point in having one without the other. And you need to have spaces where people feel comfortable, students feel comfortable. How do we encourage the youth to come to the city? There's so many universities, university campuses, you have schools. Why not create a community garden or a pop-up cinema and bring the youth in? One of the things I really enjoyed that I didn't know was going on in Joburg, because that was one of my case studies, was the walking tours. And it's a great way to interact with the city. Why not have that during holidays? And again, I'm going back to public holidays, and advertise the free walking tours, or even if it's not free, for a small fee. Bring people into the city, share the spaces with them. Because as a South African, I thought I knew what the city was about, but I learned so much more. I saw a lot in the city. I saw the visual aspects. I heard sounds. I heard cars and music, that vibe, that the city is alive. The city is not a space to fear anymore. So if we can utilize the existing infrastructure and just alter it in small ways, we can create spaces where people will want to be. Having small seating, different types of seating. I advocated for wooden seating as opposed to concrete, because concrete is cold. You don't want something that's cold and unfriendly, but wood tends to be warm, it tends to be comfortable and attracts people. So those are some of the solutions that I spoke about or wrote about in my essay, just so that we can convert some of the spaces within the city in the short term. Not about big high-rise developments, because we have that. Let's use what we have, the existing infrastructure, and try to connect those spaces and connect people to those spaces, both socially and spatially.
Amazing. And starts to speak to also issues of sustainability. How do you use materials that are more friendly for the environment and don't take away so much in terms of the environment as well? And I think it speaks to the point that both Rudadzi and Palesa were also making. And Rudadzi, I want to come to you now, just flowing from what Zubeida has said. And my question to you is then, in terms of what Zubeida has said about the future of the city, how she envisions the city, and some of the practical interventions that she's mentioned to make cities more user-friendly, more people-centered, what are the forms of governance that you think are required to make that, to manifest that into our physical reality? And I think I just want to draw on the item that you brought into the visualization studios, which was the torch, where you spoke about moving through the city when it's dark during load shedding. So speaking to our local challenges, issues of safety, how we feel in city space. And so how can governance translate to the kinds of actions that we want, so that we can realize the kinds of cities that we want to live in, that we'd feel safe in, that we'd feel included in. So just like the governance aspects, I would like you to speak to those.
Thank you. I think for me, the most important things to start with is starting to reimagine cities as places where we need to live, play, and stay in those cities. And if you look at when you travel to some other cities, when you are in those cities, you feel much more safer than your own cities back home. Precisely because of when you are around those cities, you see you are under surveillance in some way in terms of using CCTV cameras in every corner of the street. That also gives you some comfort that you are being watched, and even the other people who might think of doing some wrong things, they know that they are being watched. So I think it is very important, even from our cities, to start maybe bringing some of those tools in our city spaces, because without those, people will never feel somebody is watching them, and some criminality will continue to happen. So it is very important that when we create even public spaces where people will hang around, we also ensure that these places are safe. You also have to increase visualization in terms of security and police in those environments, so that when everybody is in that space, they feel that there's some level of protection in that environment. Yeah, I think my contribution will be that for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Rudadzi. And now I would like to begin this aspect around an intergenerational conversation. So this nexus between, is it energy or is it experience? So now we're talking about the field of planning and the contribution of the field of planning to how our spaces look, to how our cities are, and the potential of planning to be the catalyst really for transformed space. And now I would like to come to you, Palesa, being someone with almost two decades of experience in the field of the built environment. It's unbelievable, really. I must say that I believe that you are an age catfish. You are not who you say you are. So I'd just like to converse with you around this concept of being someone who's got almost 2 decades of experience. Just your reflections about being a young planner and then someone who's really embedded in the space almost 2 decades later. What would your reflection be around this aspect that what is better? Is it better to be young, energetic, entering into the space, or what is it experience? So maybe just to bring us into that conversation, and I hope it's something that kicks off a more in-depth engagement with this concept of an intergenerational conversation.
Thank you so much for the question. So having had 2 decades of experience, I'm going to put it forward in the following way. If I were going to mentor any of the young planners or going to absorb them within the city, is where do you see yourself in the next 5 years and in the next 10 years and so forth? Where do you want to make an impact? And for me, that it was what it was about. I was also not apologetic about the fact that while I'm in this space and I'm working with and I'm an advocate for the poor, I also want to earn well. So one has to be energetic because, as I said, we are advocates for the poor. Who else is going to ensure that there is bulk services and an upgrade for an informal settlement other than planners? It's us. And you've got to remain committed long into the game. So even when I have 3 decades of experience, I still see myself as a planner, perhaps not in a municipal environment, but more national environment. So I still have dreams. It would be so nice if I could be seated at a table in Pretoria at the union buildings and I'm part of the National Planning Commission. So the energy you have now is the energy that will sustain you and allow you to be impactful for years to come. I do agree that planning is a catalyst. And if there's ever such a word as catalysm, I wanted to be a part of that. And that's why in all my years of experience, I have remained in government, because there you get to give input into policies, you get to design frameworks, and you get to sit with a team of people that actually activate what you see when you look out the window. So it becomes very important also to ensure that as you embark on a journey, where do you want to be? So I know a little bit about everything, but I have established my niche. And that is also what is important. And that's why I love the built environment. You've got architects, you've got attorneys and advocates who talk planning law. You do have transport engineers. You do have water engineers. You do have environmentalists. And all of us then come together to shape what you see when you look out the window, and also just to keep influencing. So if we have graduates in this platform, how are we influencing those right now in our primary school to do this kind of work that we do? Because when we have long left the stage and we have gone out into the universe in whatever form it is that we believe in, we need them to come in and pick up from where we've left off, the same way we are doing. The other skill that I would encourage all of us to do is to have an understanding of how the built environment is funded, because I think that will make an absolute difference when we talk these plans, but we understand how is it funded from the fiscus, what does it mean for us when we are in junk status, and how do we go out there and borrow in order to enhance the built environment. And I look forward to what each and every one of you who have less than 20 years of spatial experience, I look forward to what it is that you become. And remember, this universe is a wheel. We meet today where I'm senior, but no doubt we will meet again in an environment where I need to ask you for advice. And hence I say I look forward to what you all become, because I do know we will come together. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Balasa. You've actually preempted my next question to you, which was going to be about really reflecting back to the younger you, the planner that was the younger you. And I think you've encapsulated it so well. So there'll be no need for that question. And I think it applies to everybody else in the space who is just entering the field or who is budding as a professional in the field.
Yes, absolutely.
I think it's absolutely important what you are saying, this nexus between energy and experience, particularly because we are in a space where really it's about people. And I think Munyake was really spot on when he said that. And so in the delivery of catalytic projects with big budgets and big impacts for livelihoods, I think it's great to have that balance and that mix there, but always keeping the person at the center. And with that, I would like to now come to you, Munyake, to reflect just as a young planner and as a young professional in the space. You've got a very significant title here, which says that you are an urban specialist supporting the World Bank in its interactions with the National Treasury on the City Support Program, and so on. So I've introduced you. You've got quite an illustrious title. And so I just want to get into issues of what's empowering and disempowering about being a planner, having this suite of powers, of legislative and administrative powers that enable you to play quite a significant role in the transformation of space, but also being a young person, but also working within a very political space. And so what's enabling, what's disenabling, what's empowering, what's disempowering, especially as we talk about the planning practice and the planning field as catalyst. So to what extent do you feel empowered as a planner, particularly as a young planner, to really drive spatial transformation, and in what ways do you feel there are barriers, be it because of of how young you are in the space, or the fact that there is this political administrative tension in that although you have powers, they may be, limited by the environment that you work in. So I just want to talk to issues of in what ways you feel empowered and in what ways you feel disempowered to make the necessary change and to really change. When we talk about changing the space, Rudadzi speaks to issues of inclusion, which Khuluhelo then brought much more detail to. So yeah, please come in on that point.
Thank you very much, Spay. So perhaps I'll commence with the empowering bit first. I think as a young planner, maybe our value proposition or our niche, as the HOD rightly puts it, is that we are very well adept in terms of usage of something like technology. So we're quite comfortable in the technology space. And when you get into an environment where really the much older generation are just bastions of stringent and rigid ideas, when you come with that technology edge, I think you're able to play a complementary role with your more seasoned counterparts. So that for me is quite empowering. And then they actually see the value, and I think you deliver and get quite good products if you work collectively within an institution. So that for me is an empowering bit as a planner. I've also been in the municipal space where hierarchy was quite important. The senior planner delegates to the junior planner, then the junior planner gives work to the interns. And then even when you have to bring in ideas, you kind of have to go through the same channels from bottom up. And then I noticed that was a bit of a barrier in terms of getting new ideas into the mainstream because this hierarchy thing kind of existed, These things have always been done a certain way, and who are you to come into the space and want to impose new ideas? And I think it's also our job as well, just to teach the older generation that, we do have some value to play in the space. Things are changing. There's possibly a lot of things that you don't understand as well, like technology, for example, usage of smartphones. And then equally by the same token, they have a wealth of decorated experience that we cannot buy anyway. And we also have to use that and leverage off of that to work together. So the hierarchy bit within the municipal space was probably the less empowering, but through that, you persevere. And in the environment that I'm in now, I think I work a lot with creative teams from across the globe. So the direction that we are moving is, we bring a lot of technology-based products. And that is kind of being well received in South Africa. And I think testament to that would be our relationship that we've established with National Treasury. They do see value in asking for a lot of the products that we offer, which we give to municipalities, metros in particular, including Ekurhuleni itself. So the ability to still be relevant in that space for me, I think, is quite useful. So I think I'll probably just park it there, and then we can probe further in the next round.
Wonderful. Thanks, Menyake. Just noting that we don't have much time left. We still want to open it up, but I would like to just come to Khulu now, just to close off this round of conversation. So, Khulu, I want to draw on what you've already said about issues of participation, co-creative practice, and creating cities together with people, but also focusing on this aspect around the production of knowledge about cities. So you work in SACN, which is a knowledge producer about cities. You lead the project on the Young Planners and Designers Essay Competition. Can you just reflect about inclusion in the sense of including young people in the production of knowledge about cities, and what you have learned from the experience of heading this project on young planners and designers competition, and eliciting inputs from young people and the very rich perspectives. Maybe you could reflect on some of those that we're getting from young professionals and scholars in the space. Yeah, I'm very interested in those. What are young people proposing? What are young people suggesting? And just from your practitioner perspective, what is the importance of including young people in knowledge about cities over and above the creation and the physical manifestation of cities themselves? Thanks.
Thanks, Pe. I mean, it's quite important to include young people, but I'd say, you know, going back to being people-centric, that it's important to include everyone throughout, you know, the value process, or conceptualization, knowledge production, implementation, and development. Just to leave it at that, but also just to pick up on what Monyake just mentioned about working in the municipality and like how sort of difficult it was to get his voice filtered in, or at least for interns and people at the bottom to get their inputs filtered in. And reflecting on one of the submissions we actually received, actually there were two of them that made reference to this idea of young people contributing to knowledge and making a change in practice. And one of them had actually just mentioned how it's becoming quite, it dissuades young people from being in the public sector. And, you know, Palisa has mentioned that this is the space where you can actually make the change, where you can see inputs and views actually translate to practice. But if you're a young person coming into the system, you're a young planner, a designer, you know, a built environment professional, and you don't see that uptake happen quite soon and quite quick, you tend to not see the value of being involved in that and not understand the kind of, you know, what your value is to be in the public sector in that sense. And I'm just, you know, because we worked on the Young Planners and Designers competition, but we also work on the Youth and City Space project. So these are two different cohorts. And one of them is young people that aren't in the built environment or are not in the governance space, at least not as far as training, but are activists and are quite active in their communities. And across these two cohorts of young people, what's common is really getting them involved co-creatively in the processes. And this includes in framing and shaping policies as well. So again, it goes back to in this value process, when do we include people? Does this happen? You know, do we include them in the knowledge production or in the processes of engagement once we've conceptualized? And then we need to figure out, is this responsive? Does this really change the system? Or do we include them quite earlier on? And again, it goes back to lots of things, because if we're reflecting on the Young Planners and Designers competition, a lot of what was also said was that the curriculum itself hasn't changed much. So the young planners and designers and architects that are coming out, yes, many of them are a lot hungrier. I think young people now are quite hungry to change the curriculum and to challenge the status quo and what they've been taught, to challenge colonial and, you know, apartheid design. But they'll also really reflect on how it's difficult to do so. You can only do that once you've left the institution, and you can only do that either by being part of, you know, the public sector, where you can change what actually happens on the ground. But if it becomes difficult to filter in your voice in that sense, you're dissuaded from that, you move to the public sector, or you move to an NGO space, or you move to whatever the sense may be. And again, you know, just taking it back to the competition and young people asking us, particularly Cities Network, what's going to happen with this knowledge that we've contributed through this competition? You know, we've given you these recommendations and ideas. There've been people that have, you know, come up with ideas of the youth-led repository around information. And it also links to the other youth cohort about making access to governance processes and structures easy, making sure that people really understand how the state works, that it's not a monolithic structure, it's not this homogenous thing. So are those things possible? How do we do that? What other kind of procedures and processes that would disable or enable that kind of thing? And I think, so it's quite important to also really factor in how to what end we're communicating and we're harvesting information from people, especially young people. If we're going to harvest knowledge, what are we going to do with it? especially for organizations that are, I guess, municipal or government affiliated like us. Do these voices actually get filtered in? And it's great because the visualization shows the kind of impact that they can have and to change practitioners and for them to actually see, okay, this is what's happening and this is what people want and this is how we can change the way we develop or we practice. And that's quite critical. So filtering these voices into actual processes, making sure that we don't think of knowledge generation for our own ends or think of knowledge generation as the end. It should be the start of a lengthier process where we keep engaging with people, we keep drawing them into processes so that they understand that we value their inputs and we see the value of them, and we need to keep connecting them with city practitioners and people in the built environment or even outside, whether it's, you know, people in governance and people in productivity and economic development, and enable young people directly themselves to engage and share these ideas instead of always speaking for them, instead of always, you know, consolidating these things into a nicely packaged report to a city. So I think the knowledge generation process in itself is quite tricky in that sense, but I think we need to really start thinking about how we engage people and to what ends and what the long-term strategy is when we engage and involve people in processes. Yeah, and I'm quite glad that with, you know, since this competition, we've been, and with the help of everybody else at Cities Network and Siwe and Kyra, we've been thinking about lots of ideas of really how we can bring in, and through that process of, you know, bringing people like Zveda and Munyake to share knowledge across different platforms and to make sure that they're also heard, because these are people that have quite incredible inputs and ideas. And Zveda has just, like you've mentioned, quite practical things that could be done. How do we do that? How do we move forward for that so that it's not just something that it's not knowledge that Zveda is creating in a vacuum and it's going to sit in the library at the University of Glasgow? So how do we move that knowledge forward? How do we get young people to be in these spaces, to engage with people that are practicing, and of course, also making sure that they both understand each other? And, you know, Palesa mentioned this, that people must know that there are limitations, that you need to understand the fiscus, that you need to understand this. So sometimes you cannot just post ideas as if there aren't any limitations and barriers, as if it's in a vacuum. So how do we bring these different groups, you know, practitioners and young scholars and young people outside of the built environment and governance fields who are active in their communities, who are doing things, who are running different forums and creating, you know, employment and just need support from the state? How do we bring these people together and make sure that it goes beyond just creating knowledge? You know, it goes beyond just like harvesting information. Yeah, I think I'll leave it at that.
Thanks so much, Kyra. I think you've said a mouthful, but I really like, and it's really striking what you've said around knowledge, not just for its own sake. And I think being careful not to be extractive in your engagements with young people where you're there just to elicit knowledge, but knowledge to what end and to what extent does that knowledge then filter and then manifest in the kinds of practices that we then see. I think that would be the best definition of youth inclusion and youth co-creating our cities. And I think you've encapsulated that point quite well. Similarly, the point around curriculum change and how do we support and seed decolonial practice and the decolonial practitioner from the education stage going into the system. And I think you said something very important around it. My understanding of what you said is that it's one thing for an individual practitioner to be decolonial in their thinking, to be very context specific in what they want to practice and what they want to see. But if the institution is not positioned to support that, and if that kind of practice is not institutionalized, and I think it ties into what Palesa was saying about the need to understand how the system works, and if how the system works is not decolonially oriented, then that presents a significant barrier. I would like to now, with this little time remaining, to open up the floor for some perspectives. Please feel free to put your questions into the chat. But I think I'd like to just give the opportunity to our panel members, really in the spirit of intergenerational conversation and exchange, maybe just to interact with what your fellow panel members have said, if you'd like to follow up on any particular thread of the conversation, I'll give you this opportunity now, whether just by raising your hand or indicating that you'd like to say something, and then we'll open it up to the rest of the floor. I'll just man the chat and see what's coming up from our audience in terms of what they would like to ask specific panel members or just in general, and then we'll move into a closing. So if anyone would like to just interact, yes, Zubeda has her hand up, please come in.
So I'd just like to build on what Lolo said just briefly. And I do like that Lolo advocates for the encouragement of knowledge on different platforms and with different built environment professionals and across different sectors, because it is important to get your voice out there, but it's also to try to see change and try to understand how that can manifest in city spaces. So having a platform like this has been very encouraging, and I would definitely encourage the youth to engage with these platforms, not to think that their voices will be drowned out, but to know that there are spaces that exist where they can. But then let's take it a step further and see what more we can do and how we can collaborate and work together. Thank you.
Great. Would anyone else from the panel like to come in? I think Munyake would like to say something. Please come in.
Thank you, Spe. Perhaps this is just a comment on something that was said by the HOD, Balisa. The issue around people understanding how the built environment is actually funded. I think it's more critical now for that understanding to actually be imparted. So generally, the fiscus is actually under tremendous pressure, COVID has taken away all the resources that were earmarked for all kinds of development towards more health measures. So it's not just understanding how the built environment is funded, it's also understanding going forward ways in which we can find innovative ways to fund the infrastructure. And by innovative ways, I want to talk about the involvement of the private sector a lot more. There's this misconception that everything that's built environment and that is public infrastructure should only be funded by governments, and that's not the case at all. So there's new trends and new mechanisms for funding infrastructure, like land value capture, that I think young people need to engage a lot more with these emerging sort of innovative patterns, because there's austerity measures everywhere. No one has a big purse anymore to fund infrastructure. So that's something that I thought was very important just to state. And I really agree with the HOD there that it's quite critical for young planners getting into this space just to understand how the financing of cities and development actually work. So thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. Thanks for that, Munyake. Are there any other perspectives, inputs from our panel members? I think Tuluhelo has a hand up. And
thanks, Faye.
Munyake, if you could lower your hand. Thank you. Please come in, Tulu.
Thanks. It's going back to your question to Rudadzi and just getting, I guess, more clarity when you asked what are the kind of governance or the institutional arrangements that need to be in place to carry out some of, for instance, what Zubeda had suggested, but also going back to Balisa and what she said about the red light district type going on in Ekurhuleni, and how it could work to recognize it, of course, and to formalize it. But then thinking about, of course, formalization may make it safer for sex workers to work, but how sometimes when the state intervenes and makes things, legible in that sense, that a lot of things change. And if, for example, we'll take, Operation Clean Sweep in Johannesburg and street trading there and how the stores and all of that. And since then, it's been quite chaotic. Lots of traders have been displaced. There's now a sort of mafia type thing that's run by the JMPD that controls who gets a stall, who doesn't get a stall. And then also thinking about how people would say, you know, we had a little organization going on here, whether it's a young person, but the formalization and the legibility, through that we've lost the momentum, or things have slowed down, or state involvement has made it difficult for us to move the way we used to, because of course formal processes, you need to stick to them, and they tend to do that. The bureaucratic process tends to be lengthy sometimes and complicated. So I guess it's just a question to the HOD about how do we make things formal or support things without taking them over and destroying them in the process? Or how do we put in place measures that make sure that when you do formalize or you do make something a lot more legible, that people actually have the incentive to go for that support, that they don't feel dissuaded. If you're going to convert a parking lot to something else at night, but you need to fill 15 pieces of forms, and then you must pay a certain fee, or then you must do this, then what's the incentive to do that? And I guess it's also that thing about understanding what those processes are, as you posed to Ruzani, and what the failure to stick to those would actually be.
Thanks so much, Tulu. I think I'll hand right over to Palisa to respond. And then I'll take just one question from the audience, just given time constraints. And then we'll move on from there. Please come in, Palisa, on a very important conversation. And I am personally very invested. Would love to have an offline conversation with you around that one. Yes, please come in.
Yeah, I really feel old now, because the comments that have been raised and the questions that have been asked, I'm realizing you can only be that dynamic and that energetic when you're younger. And before I respond, I would urge for all of you to never let go of this passion, this curiosity, and also the thought thinking that is coming out of this session. It will carry you beyond. And I'm convinced now more than ever that I am going to work for some of you when I'm much older. So be that as it may, why make things formal? And that has to come out. And hence I said, for me, I'll always stay in government, because this is where you can create that bylaw, you can create that policy, you can create that framework, and you can give input into what kind of resolutions do you then take. We must know that all of these things take a lot of work. So for us as Black students to be able to be at a well-recognized academic institution with other students who are not of the same race, somebody had to sit down and say, how do we make things right? And you would know from history, this takes time. You need to know who are you targeting. You need to have support. So identifying the stakeholders as well is very important. We would have come up across various theories when we were all studying planning in some form or another, and understanding what is the developmental approach that is applicable in this particular instance. We also need to package the benefits for me very clearly. And then what is also a bitter pill to swallow is the time frames. So we need to be understanding that a policy, a precinct plan, a certain kind of thinking or paradigm shift is going to take time. And very often we are very vocal and energetic in the beginning. And then a few years later, when this formalization ought to be tabled, we are not there. You've moved on to another job. You've given up because it's taken so long. You're overwhelmed because you didn't take into consideration the resources that would be required. You also weren't aligned to a mentor or somebody experienced than you to then also teach you other options of going about what it is that you are targeting. And so those are the things for me, I would then say, and sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's harder. So are you working on a clean slate? or are you working on something that's already there and you must do the research? There's nothing worse like reinventing the wheel. I come in as Palisa, I put a proposal down, whether it's National Treasury, whether it's the Development Bank, whether it's to another sphere, and they say, oh, we received something like this a year ago from Spelele, and it's working very well in the Eastern Cape. What then do you do? So research, and I quite like now where we are going as a world, connectivity through social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. People can find you, you can find people. And that helps at the very beginning to do your research well. If you're going to formalize, if you're going to legalize, if you're going to embrace what's out there. And then it becomes very tricky because you won't always get people who agree with you. So the skill of articulating your issue, and then more especially as women, that emotional intelligence. So you remain footed and grounded and calm in that boardroom or when you are negotiating, in as much as you talking from the heart. And that's what we do as planners. And then you'll come across other stakeholders whom you think seem rigid. So it's all of those things in one.
Thank you so much, Melissa. And I think you indirectly started to respond to the one comment we have in the chat here from Toko Puti, who was asking our panelists, but unfortunately there won't be enough time. How are young planners dealing with the stereotype that their careers are stiff and boring, too serious, and so on? And Togo also says that for her, Planning Month has been so great for creating awareness and improving her understanding and appreciation for the built environment. So I think Upalisa starts to talk to the very technical, very granular aspects of our field that may seem like it's so boring, but also driving home the importance of understanding even that which we think is not so interesting. So I think to drive that within our various audiences and in communities as well, to drive that understanding of how everything happens, how decisions are made, how plans are implemented, and so on. And I think our panelists have done a great job in their inputs of also just drawing us to a close. Unfortunately, we won't have an opportunity for proper closing statements. But just in closing, I'd like to call in Rudadzi, who had a hand up and wanted to share something. And if Rudadzi, you could just bring that together with a closing statement from you. And then from there, we will bring the session to a close and to just thank everyone for their time. Today, I'll do just a quick closing after Rudadzi, but just before we get there, just to really thank everyone for such an insightful and interesting conversation. Please come in, Rudadzi.
Thank you very much. I think HOD has covered some of the things that I wanted to raise. I think it is very important to also think about the objects or the objective of planning in general in terms of dealing with some of the issues that we face in our cities. When we look in terms of governance, HOD has indicated we have policies and bylaws that are also in place in cities. And I think in some cases, the problem is maybe how those policies maybe are communicated to communities, because sometimes with the lack of communication, people will feel as if they're being prosecuted for their own rights to be, to be settling wherever they want to settle. But they also need to understand that there are policies and bylaws that are also needed to be followed. For an example, the enforcement thereof of some of these bylaws also contributes also to some of the things we see in our city. So it is also very important that as young people, as they're coming into this space of planning, what are other mechanisms that we can use to communicate, some of these policies, with communities? That will also be very important. We have apps these days that will also assist in the process. So we need also to explore some of those, platforms to help. Just in closing, again, we visited Singapore at some point. It is very clean city. And then when you ask around, why is this city so clean? they say they impose to any offender, even eating a chewing gum on the, on the public, they impose a $1,000 a sort of fine, and then people are, they tend to follow, that kind of bylaw. They don't litter around, they don't do things that they are not supposed to do because they enforce, So I'm just raising that we as we move as young people in this space, we also need to be thinking about some of those innovations and how can we then improve even enforcement in our cities in terms of our bylaws. And for me, I'm very excited to be part of the planning month from the city of Ekurhuleni, and I've been part of the Cities Network activities, and I'm excited to see them, benefiting even more people. And I'm hoping that as we move forward, we will also open up and encourage more young people to also to form part of this platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rudadzi. Thank you to all the panel members. And I think just in closing from Palisa here, some more words of advice for young planners. I've lost it now. The chat is jumping up, but I think the essence of it is that get yourself a mentor who is techie. They will run you beyond the limits of what you ever thought in terms of your career. And she's just saying that she can't wait to see you become and take up space in this field of ours. And I think that's a great way and on a great note to close this wonderful conversation with. And I hope it's the beginning of a long intergenerational conversation between young planners and those who are more experienced in the space. And just from my side, again, all I have is gratitude. Thank you for being with us today. I'd like to now maybe perhaps hand over to Kyra just to wrap us up very nicely and adjourn us. Kyra, if you could please come in and just close the session for us. Thank you from me.
Sure, thank you so much, Spare. I'm sorry that we've gone over time, but it's just been such a fantastic conversation. And so thank you to all our speakers who've interacted so nicely with each other and complemented each other's words. I think it's so fantastic that we are able to come together in an intergenerational way and just kind of meet authentically as people. And I hope to all of the young people on the call that you feel empowered and energized by this discussion and know that there are always spaces for you to make an impact, or for us, me included, to make this impact and to make our voices heard. So yeah, just feeling very grateful, and of course to our colleagues at the City of Ekurhuleni for this partnership. It's been fantastic, and excited to continue our partnership through the task team. So thank you very much, Rudadzi, Palisa, and Nobuzwe for inviting us in to be a part of this session. And a final reminder, our HOD has asked us all to please Google the City of Ekurhuleni because we want to make it the most Googled city this month. So let's all create awareness around the City of Ekurhuleni and help to achieve its future aspirations. Thank you very much, colleagues, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. I've done my Googles already. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Spare. You were a wonderful host. Thank you, Cities Network. Thank you, all other panel members.
No, thanks for having us as always. Like, as I said, I hope it's just the beginning of like a long conversation and interaction and not the end. So yeah, thanks for inviting us. We're here to stay now.
Thank you.
Just a note from the host, Creamer Media's Contract Publishing. I'd like to thank everyone who participated in today's session. The recording of today's webinar will be sent to you in due course. Thank you very much for your time. Stay well and goodbye.